lot of that has to do with the turnaround. There was no turnaround. So,
It also has to do with the skill of the drivers.
yeah,
My husband has taken fuel trucks and school buses and all
Yeah.
kinds of things in places where nobody else would want to go.
Yeah.
And he said, no, that's no problem. In fact, there's one story about when he was working for the Wayne road crew. And they gave him a truckload of gravel and said, take it out and hard scrabble the road, and where it gets bad, dump the load and come back. And he didn't come back, and he didn't come back, and finally they went looking for him and found he'd driven clear across to the next town. And realized he was in the wrong town, turned around, and came back, and they said, oh, we forgot where you live, we should have known better.
oh,
The road isn't bad.
Not by his standards, no.
Yeah.
Another way of going at the property tax issue is, rather than just taking a straight percentage from people's property taxes and putting it back into the road, if somebody can prove that they're the person who's been maintaining the road, and they can prove how much they've put into the road, should there be some way to give them a credit on their taxes? The problem with that is that sometimes their taxes aren't worth as much as what they've put into the road.
and then no town is good at giving credit. So,
Yeah,
Well,
then,
maybe it should be a state credit.
I feel like
State
that's sort
caused
of
this
beyond our
problem, but
scope.
that's gone beyond, that's again, another mandate that you're gonna be fighting MMA about, because would it be nice if you had documentation that you've been doing this road in? Yeah, it would be nice, but it's not,
Towns aren't gonna give up their money.
towns don't give up their money.
They don't have
They-
enough of it as it is.
Yeah, they won't. It's like the mill rate. Once it goes up, do you think it will ever go down? Yeah, just, why would they do that? No,
But let's find something more to spend it on.
exactly. So.
Well, I would think if you instituted the minimum maintenance, you would sort of be using some of that
Yeah.
tax money, to
Mhm.
institute that, that isn't currently being used
Exactly, yeah.
for that purpose.
If you could get that to be part of this, then that would be, see, I would be happy with that. If they had a minimum maintenance, then you can do up above and beyond whatever you want to do. But if they had a minimum,
Right.
that would be nice.
Yeah,
That would be a
It
big
would be a
plus.
huge step forward.
That's-
We do have sympathy for towns. We know that maintaining roads is a huge expense, and we understand they don't want to take on more roads. Most towns now will not accept a new road, at least unless it's first brought up to full town road standard by the owners, and lots of towns won't take on a road even then.
But the minimum expense, I just have a question. Are you just talking about those that have the public easement requirement, like not like the literal private roads, but it's like road
Yeah,
association?
no, not including private roads.
I just
Private
curious.
roads, usually people know that they're getting in on a private
Right.
road. And usually there's a road association to share the maintenance.
Mhm.
And there are problems with that too, that, they also complain that what are they getting in return for their taxes? But at least they're not, in most cases, they're not putting up with the public wearing out the road.
Yes.
Although I do know a few cases where there's a road association on a public easement, and that gets to be problematic. So I was just thinking of something else too. I don't know what it was.
You mentioned something about the recordings. There are no recordings in the town. We, during this first round of, first 2 rounds, going back and forth with state and local, we asked, and they asked, well, I wasn't on state and local, but we asked MMA to get in touch with the towns to see what their recordings were like. They don't have any. Nobody ever got back. Well, they said no one ever got back with them.
You mean recording for abandoned and discontinued
Yeah.
roads?
Talking about
Exactly.
the road inventory.
Yeah,
There are some towns that have done a road inventory, but they don't even know that they were supposed to file it anywhere.
right.
I know that, Fayette, I know did a road inventory a number of years ago. What's, there's one of the towns down on the coast, and I can't think, I want to say, New something or other. It's not Newburgh, not Newcastle.
I think Lincolnville did that.
Hmm.
I think Lincolnville did a,
Yeah.
I know they did. We looked at Lansing at one time, but
One of the things that I would like to do is to get crowdsourcing going on, and get volunteers from each town, as many towns as we can, to do the research. And I've had a few people that say that they're interested in possibly doing that. One person did start on it. What I tell them is, if you can't get the town to allow you to come in and look at their records, go to the state library. They've got an excellent collection of town reports for years and years and years for most towns. Towns are supposed to file them every year with the library, and they don't all. The problem is that in some towns, the annual report doesn't have the warrant in it. That's rare, but I have run across that in few places. And in most towns, they don't report the result of the vote. They only report the warrant article. But if you can say, you can go to the town and say, look, we know there's a warrant article in the year 1947 that says to see if the town will discontinue the road. Can you give us the result of the vote on that article? That's not so burdensome. That's something they can look up pretty easily because they know the year. And then, of course, there's
How do you know
sometimes.
the year? Do you just rely on someone's knowledge of
If you
actually
don't,
knowing?
no, if you find it in a town report,
Mhm.
then you know what year that town report.
But how do you know which town reports to
You
start with?
look, you look
You
through
just-
all of them.
Yes,
It can
Yeah.
take me a couple of days to go through all the records for a town. And you get started pretty fast at skimming through them. You don't have to read every article all the way down through. You kind of get a feel for what the pattern in each town is. Usually about the first half a dozen or a dozen articles are the same ones. They're salaries for the town employees and that sort of thing. Then if it says school, if it says cemetery, if it says snowmobile club, if it says, there are a whole bunch of things that you pick out a couple of words and say, nope, don't need that one. You skim down through it. But you come to one that says road and it gets so it jumps out at you. And, oh, no, this is just maintaining the town roads. You don't need that one. Okay, this one is closing a road to winter maintenance. That might be interesting. Here's one that says to see if the town will vote to discontinue the road.
I see.
And then the problem is trying to figure out which road it is, because often the road name's changed. And in the old reports, often it will say the road from Farmer Brown's corner to Joe Smith's barn. And nobody remembers where either of them lived.
Mm.
So then this is where MMA is saying, oh, we can't do that. It's gonna be too much research and it'll cost an arm and a leg. Well, identify the ones you can. Start with those. That's at least something. And then if somebody comes in and says, well, is this road or isn't it? You can say, okay, well, now we've got to look up this one and just do them one at a time.
I wonder if
eventually
they
you
can
get
also
through
put
it.
it on like the property part for the taxes.
What is that?
You know how you have the property
Yeah.
cards and you can now, like, almost all of them are searchable
Mhm.
online?
Yeah.
Why couldn't they make 113, like Moon Cove Lane, be like, it's a private road? You know, road association,
Mhm.
or abandoned road, or discontinued road, and just put it right on the card.
If they knew. they
Yeah,
could do
well,
it.
I mean, they have to start somewhere, but then
Yeah.
they could start tagging them, and then they would probably start seeing.
That's
Once you start doing inventory, then you're gonna start seeing, right, but the one, they could just start doing that.
that's
And then it would be good for realtors, it'd be good for title companies, everybody would be able to see it right off, because that's the first thing you look at, isn't it?
That's another thing I've suggested in the past, is have each town publish the list of roads they know they do have.
I saw some of this stuff before.
Yeah. If you start there, and what I said, make it easy, make it cheap for the town. Make up a list saying, these are roads we know we maintain. And
Well,
send it out
Peter
with
seems
the
like he
tax
made a lot of
bills.
progress on that,
Yeah,
so
Yeah,
we
because
have that,
what
I
Pete
mean,
Coughlin is
yeah.
doing is gonna be huge.
yeah, so I think like, we've made progress on that part, so I think now it's been identified. So I think now. It seems to me still like what you guys are still saying is access liability and the maintenance
Mhm.
issues for these roads and figuring out who's responsible and
And
who has rights to it,
That's the
right?
problem, is figuring out.
Yeah.
So what I said was, publish a list of the roads you know you do have,
Mhm.
put it out with the tax bill, so you don't have an extra mailing. And say, these are the roads we know we have. If there's a road you think we've missed that should be on this list, you have so much time in which to notify us. And if we look at, and we say, oh, you're right, we missed that one, you're right, we do maintain that, then you just add it to the list. If you don't think you do maintain it and somebody says you think you should, then look up that one road and have a hearing on it, have the landowners do research on it as best they can, see if you can figure out what the actual status of that road is. And if it is indeed something that needs to be taken care of, then you go through the proper procedure of discontinuance or statutory abandonment or whatever is appropriate to settle what that road is. And by doing that, then you should be able to say, well, if nobody complained about the rest of these, then they probably are presumed abandoned.
Mhm.
But, that would be a place to start and a fairly simple way for towns to do it.
Yeah, to let everybody know.
Yeah.
But then what about the ones where the people who now are coming? It seems to me there's a lot of people in the state who don't have access to their houses,
Mhm,
right? And I think that's what the urgency was with forming the committee.
mhm.
I mean, so I feel like, what do you think? Do you think that that's the major priority, or do you think it's?
I think that is definitely one of the major priorities. Part of the problem that comes into this, and this is where, again, it's a safety issue. When people can't get anyone to help, they get desperate and they do things they would not ordinarily do.
Mhm.
So when you call the police and the police say, I'm sorry, it's a civil matter, there's nothing I can do about it, it'll have to go to court. And when you file a restraining order for a restraining order at the court and the court denies it,
Mhm.
then I've got to get to my house somehow. And this is where I've got a whole list of weapons people have used against each other. An iron pipe, a hatchet, a machete, a pistol. Somebody patrolling his road with an assault rifle, which he didn't intend to use, but he was using it for his own protection, carrying it for his own protection. Somebody reported that their pigs got poisoned. Somebody else was getting anonymous death threats that her animals were going to be injured. Threats that your house is going to burn down and the fire department isn't going to come. All these things, and this is because people feel desperate because nobody's helping.
So do you think for the access issue, what would be the quickest way you feel to help people be able to get access or resolve the issue quickly? Like, what would you see? Because you've seen so much and you've been through this process so much. Obviously, legislature, it takes time no matter what we're gonna do. It's gonna be a long
Court case
process.
forever too.
And court cases forever too. But what,
I know, James.
if you could have a perfect world, what would it be? What would it look like?
A perfect world would say that everybody has a right to property access, which the Constitution says access is a property right attached to the property. If we could get back to basics and go back to the Constitution. Of course, I'm kind of fond of saying that in the beginning, we had one rule, don't eat of the tree, and we blew it. So God says, okay, I'll make it a little more explicit. We've got 10 rules. We blew that. He says, okay, I gotta be more detailed. He gave us Leviticus and Deuteronomy. This is what happened to our statutes. Main revised statutes used to fit, our main statutes used to fit in 2 volumes. And then it got to be where it's 2 shelves and it just keeps going on. If we could get back to basics and say, look at the Constitution says that you have a right to property access. But then the problem is, how do you preserve it when you get 2 landowners butting heads against each other? One saying it's my land and one saying it's everybody's land. It's not easy. And all I can say is just keep chipping away at the edges. Another thing that I had in here, another thing that would be good to have is if there was some kind of legal assistance for people on these roads, or at least a place where they can get mediation to try to defuse some of these situations before they explode.
But would you consider that a priority?
When you got people shooting at each other, yeah, probably.
You'd have to have something with enforcement though behind mediation, and maybe it shouldn't be mediation, maybe it should be arbitration. So that way it's more, because mediation, depending on the agreements that are signed, in my experience, if you don't come to an agreement, that's kind of it.
And
Whereas-
it doesn't work. It doesn't
Whereas
always,
arbitration, or some type of agency action,
Mhm.
where it's like the agency has like a hearing, like Department of Health and Human Services, and then their law, whatever it is that they're written, then it's enforced by the police.
Mhm.
I think that's probably more what you're looking for, is something with a little bit of teeth.
I would like to think that people can figure out a way to get along, but
I would
That's being
too, but I live,
optimistic.
I actually have a road association, so.
Hmm.
We've had some very interesting conversations.
Mhm.
See, and I have a road association
Mhm.
and not. Well, I haven't given to it this year because we just moved there in March, April.
Hmm.
So, but. Seems, I offered to pay this year and they said, no, we have got plenty of money. You don't need to do that. You just moved in. So, they can work.
Mhm.
Well, road
But-
associations, I mean, it's pretty much a coming together of
Yeah.
people already on the road who want to share maintenance and not
And-
have to pay
yeah.
the heavy bills for road maintenance. So I like having a road association.
Mhm.
But we have too many situations, I think, in Maine where there aren't road associations or somebody's buying up the middle of the road and preventing access to all the people on the back
That,
end of the road.
that's where all of this. priority
Is, and
list
so there
comes in.
needs to be some type of mechanism, it sounds like, listening to everyone,
Yeah.
where they can get it resolved and not have to spend, because the courts are backed up, and they always will be, so.
That brings up another thing, which is that where you have a road association and there's a property on the road that is owned by the town.
Mhm,
I don't know of any place where a town is pitching in on the dues.
mhm,
And where this gets interesting is that Rebecca from MMA said that in most cases where a public easement was retained when a road was discontinued, it's because there was town land or water. And I said, no, that's not true, because since 1965, anytime a road is discontinued, it automatically retains a public easement unless they say not to. And so there are all kinds of roads all across the state that have public easements on them, and there's no public land.
mhm.
But because it's a public easement, the public gets to use it anyway. A lot of these are through roads. If they were dead ends, it wouldn't be such a problem, because if they go nowhere, who's gonna go in there? But if it's a through road, people see it as a shortcut across town, especially if it shows up on GPS as being a through road. And in a lot of these cases, GPS says it's a shortcut. They drive in, they find out it doesn't go through anymore. It's not been maintained in the middle, and they turn around, they go out again. So they use the road twice. Wear it out twice as fast. But where there is town-owned land on one of these roads, can we require that the town has to be a paying member of the road association?
I don't know, that's a question.
I feel like that's a little beyond our scope, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Getting into road associations.
Yeah, probably, unfortunately.
So the use of the word public,
Mhm.
who designates who is public?
Yeah,
And then get away from that word, get away from the word public, is the people. If you use the word public, then I'm going over with my ATV and publicly using it.
mhm.
That's not what a road is supposed to be for. It's
Okay.
not who uses it as the public, it's who uses it. It's who uses it for living.
Mhm.
So you shouldn't be using it as a public.
Okay, there are two things that come into that.
Public or
One
private.
is that Title 23, Section 3022 defines a public easement as for being for public use by foot or motor vehicle. And the definition they use for motor vehicle excludes ATVs, snowmobiles, and electric wheelchairs for some reason. But 3021 doesn't say that. You have to go to 3022 to see it. And so for years, a lot of people have been just assuming that public use means anything goes. And the decision in our case, Town of Fayette versus Mantor, kind of opened Pandora's box, because the court said that the public easement is for, gives the public an unfettered right of access. Well, what's unfettered mean?
Yeah.
No chains on it, do anything you want. So we get ATVs and log skidders and everything in between. And that's not what was supposed to be intended by public use. It was supposed to be by foot or by motor vehicle. So that's one aspect of it. What's the other thing I was going to say? Oh, the reason that they retain it as public use is because if you go way back in the history, most of these old roads weren't taken in fee simple. They weren't actually, the town bought the land for the road. The town simply took an easement over the land, and the land under the road still belongs to the abutting property owners. So if that road is ever discontinued, the easement is gone, and the property owner then has his right to use the road to the center line again. He can build a stone wall down the middle. If he owns both sides, he can build his barn in the middle. So when a road is discontinued, that road has to be given back to the property owner who owned it. And so they're saying that in order to give it to the guy behind him for an access, that's a taking of private property for private use, which is unconstitutional. So it has to be taken for a public use. So that's why they call them public easements. But what I've been saying for years is you've got three solutions. All three are unconstitutional. The first solution that they used way back was when a road is discontinued, it's gone. And that resulted in properties being landlocked. So then a lot of towns and counties started the practice of keeping a private way subject to gates and bars when they discontinued the road. There wasn't anything in the law that said they could do that, but they did it anyway. And for years that worked pretty well. The people, agreed to, well, yeah, I'll let my landowner cross my land, no big problem. But then because the Maine Supreme Court said you can't do that, they said, well, we'll make them public easements. Well, now they're public easements, the public comes in and destroys the road, which destroys property access, and you're back to where you were in the beginning. So my thought was, which one of those does the least possible damage? Well, in most cases, somebody doesn't buy a piece of land and say, well, look, it abuts a road. I own the land under the road. If that road gets discontinued someday, I can have my land back. Most people don't think about the fact that they own the land under the road. So if it's given to the property owner behind him as an access, he hasn't really lost anything because it was a road, just now it's a private road instead of being a public road. And this is why I fought to get the discontinuance statute changed to say that if the property owners can agree to grant each other private easements, then you can get rid of the public easement. This actually, I was not the only person who came up with this idea. I came up with it independently, but the town of Newburgh, there were some people who owned a road that went and crossed a town line, and it only served 4 people in the town. And they went to the county and said, can we get this road, this county road, discontinued because people are going through from the other town and tearing up our road? And the county was a little bit smart. They said, if we discontinue that road, there is no road and you will all be landlocked. But if you are willing to grant each other private easements, then we will discontinue that road. And the landowners got together, they granted each other private easements, and the county discontinued the road. So if that could be done in more situations, I think that is about the best solution you're going to find. My hope is that when they put that into the discontinuance statute, that they have to allow the abutters to try to do that, that people will say, well, here's the choice. If I don't grant my neighbor private access, then the town is going to be compelled to keep a public easement. And if they keep a public easement, everybody and his brother can use it anytime he wants, day or night, any time of the year, and I've got no control over it. And they're not responsible for maintaining it. If I agree to let my neighbors have a private easement, I know who's going to be using it. It's going to be a limited number of people. We can set up a road association and we can make them responsible for keeping it in.
Have you tried that personally on your?
We have not tried it on ours because ours was discontinued years ago under the old law.
Have they tried it to mod? No.
The road has never been formally discontinued. The
Yours
argument
has been, theirs hasn't been.
the argument on theirs is that according to one party, it's abandoned by common law, and according to the other party, it's abandoned by statute.
What about
Well,
the
if it
other?
was abandoned by statute, wouldn't it have had to gone through the process of abandonment?
This is another place where there's a flaw in the law. Under the old section 3028, up until very recently, there was no requirement to file it anywhere. And it even says in the law that when they did pass a requirement to file it with the Registry of Deeds and DOT, they said that lack of any record is not proof that the road isn't in fact abandoned. So I don't see anything that can keep a town from saying, oh, you know what, that was abandoned years ago, wasn't it? Yeah, I seem to remember something at a selectmen's meeting sometime about we agreed it was abandoned. We don't have a record of it, but that's what it was. And that's kind of what the Mars town, Cornish, was trying to do. One of the select people did the research and said, yeah, I think this road was abandoned years ago under 3028, and therefore it's a public easement, but there's no record of it. But because it's in dispute now, MMA is saying, don't make that declaration.
Touch it.
So if it's discontinued, then you can't change a public easement to a private easement, but if it's discontinued, you can change this public easement to a private easement.
That's another thing that could be done that would be fairly simple, is to clarify, and this is something I was hoping for at the time that legislation went through, to clarify that section 3026A can also be used for extinguishing a public easement. And it says discontinuance of town ways and public easements. But then everything in the law, when you go down through it, is for how to discontinue town ways. If it could be included in there that a public easement can also be discontinued if the landowners agree,
To a
then
private
that's
easement.
something we can
Yeah.
do on our road.
And that's something you can do on your own without any legislation. You could do that now on your road. She could do that on her road.
If you can get the landowners to agree,
Yeah,
that's the catch.
and so if you can get them to do that, the only way that it's going to be advantageous is if you can get the town to say, we will do minimal maintenance. So all those three things could make this work.
The other thing that can make it work is that if the town says, yes, that's a public easement, then there's motivation for saying, we don't want it to be a public easement, let's
Let's
agree
do a
to make it a
private.
private easement. And often what happens, town of Newfield tried it, and they got hung up because one person who owns property with other access doesn't want anything to do with it. And what can sometimes be done is if you've got a road that goes in and the people at the beginning don't want to agree, but the people at the end do want to agree, okay, so make that part private. And, okay, so it's public for the first 200 feet and then it's private after that. After a while, the person on those first 200 feet is gonna see that people are coming in, finding a gate, turning around, and going out again, and their part of the road is getting worn out. And the part that's private is in nice shape because now it's not being used by the public, so maybe.
The
they'll
only
be
problem
motivated to
with
join
that
in.
is, again, your gate. That's a big problem for me.
If it's an unlocked gate, just to indicate to people, this is now a private road, you have to get out of your car and open the gate.
Yeah, but you'd have to post. You
Yeah.
have no choice, but you'd have to post for the ATV guy who's gonna come along. And I'm not saying this because I think some people will play, I didn't see that, but if it's an unlocked gate, I just still have a problem with the gate in emergency vehicles. They're still gonna have to get out and. Oh, okay, but it is,
You can definitely post it as private,
yeah,
which you can't do now under the current law.
that's true. And yeah, riding, because we ride bikes. And yeah, we'd go so far, and if it says private,
Mhm.
then we're not touching it, we turn around, so. And I think your regular person will do that.
Mhm.
And once in a while, you'll get a Yahoo, and we all have them, so.
Mhm. Like the ones who came in, my daughter caught them tearing up and down the road and spewing the fresh gravel out of it. And went out and gave them what for. And they waited until after dark and came in and did donuts in the end of her driveway.
Yeah.
And she grabbed her cell phone and went running out to the end of the road, calling the police. And the police said, did you get a license plate number?
How do you
And
do
she
that?
said, no,
with a
it's
dog?
dark, but come to think of it, when they did that last donut, they peeled their license plate off. It's lying here in the road.
Did they come out?
Oh, yeah. And they went and talked to the parents of the kids and it didn't happen again after that.
All right, so I have 1 minute left. I'm gonna end this and then restart it. I apologize. I just don't have the pro
Mhm.
Zoom yet, so I'm gonna do that and then start it since this seems like a good break place. And while we're breaking, does anyone need to go to the ladies' room or
I was gonna
anything?
say seventh inning stretch.
All right, so if you go out here.